Hello, bienvenidos, and welcome. Thank you, and we are delighted that you are here to join us for a very, very special lunch program. At each global conference, we bring leaders and insights from around the world so that we can all best advance a thriving world. In a little while, our panel on the state of the world will begin, expertly moderated by the New York Times' Nick Kristof. But first, we are honored to welcome to our stage the President of Argentina, Javier Milei. Round of applause for that. It sounds like I've already, you already are pre-sold, but I will tell you that President Milei is an economist, a libertarian, and a specialist in economic growth. Only 2 years after he entered politics, he was elected President of Argentina, receiving more than 14 million votes, the highest number for any presidential candidate in Argentine history. President Milei took office amid an annual inflation rate of more than 200%, with 41% of Argentines living below the poverty line. In his brief tenure so far, President Milei has spearheaded an ambitious plan for fiscal reform and the elimination of unproductive regulations. He's also helped stabilize the foreign exchange rate. His policies have sparked a decline in the monthly rate of inflation, and in the first quarter of this year, Argentina achieved a financial surplus, the first time in 16 years. I know all of us wish President Milei continuing success in his work to bring growth and opportunity to the fantastic people of Argentina. For those who wish to hear President Milei's remarks translated into English, you will find headsets there on your table, and I encourage you to find them and prepare them now. Señor Presidente, we thank you once again for joining us and look forward to your remarks. And on behalf of all of us, vamos, vamos, Argentina. Please join me in welcoming President Javier Milei.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by thanking the Milken Institute and all those involved in the organization of this event. And I would also like to express my personal thanks to Michael Milken for making this event possible. The Milken Institute has for decades remained one of the few international think tanks that has remained steadfast in its defense of the true principles of capitalism and the ideas of liberty, something that is unfortunately scarce in today's world. A few months ago, I addressed the world at the Davos World Economic Forum, and I expressed my deep concern about the road the West has taken in recent years. What I said during that address, which apparently got a lot of attention, was that the West was in danger. And the West is in danger because its leaders have long moved away from the ideas of liberty, the ideas that turned the West into the greatest civilizing feat in human history. And instead of defending the ideas that created the prosperity everyone here enjoys, they listen to siren songs that inexorably lead to socialism and consequently to poverty. And back then I said that I knew this for certain, because I come from Argentina, where all of this, sadly, has already happened in the last 100 years. In a certain way, we Argentines are prophets of an apocalyptic future that we have already lived through. All these discussions going on nowadays based on supposed well-meaning intentions to help others based on a mistaken idea about the nature and the role of the state, relying on economic theories that have long been refuted by data and by empirical evidence, we Argentines have experienced them since 100 years ago, and unfortunately, implementing those ideas led to a ruin. The result is known to all, from having the world's highest per capita GDP down to a country where 60% of the population are poor and over 15% are extreme poor. Although Argentina may well be the most emblematic case in the history of the Western world, reflecting the failure of collectivist ideas, it's not the exception, but the rule. Every time it has been tried out, socialism has ended in failure economically, socially, culturally, and besides, as it's a philosophy that goes against human nature, the only mechanism they have had to implement it has been by murdering 150 million human beings. But I haven't come here to the Mecca of capitalism to criticize socialism, but rather I have come to defend capitalism, as I stand before you, since you are the true heroes of the history of progress in the West. Although faced with constant criticism today, defending the model of liberty is really not difficult, because the direct relationship between the implementation of free market capitalism and the explosion of prosperity that humanity has seen in the last 250 years can be easily demonstrated. If we were to look at a graph depicting the evolution of per capita GDP throughout human history, we would see a graph shaped like a hockey stick, a function that has remained constant for 90% of the time, and then shot up exponentially as from the 19th century. So, from the year 0 to the year 1800, approximately, world per capita GDP almost remained constant. But starting in the 19th century, and as a result of the Industrial Revolution, per capita GDP not only increased, but did so exponentially. And in the last 150 years, it multiplied by 15 and created an explosion of wealth that lifted 90% of the world's population out of poverty, getting to a point where by 2020 only 5% of the global population lived in extreme poverty. Far from being the cause of our problems, free enterprise capitalism as an economic system is the best instrument that our species has known of to end hunger, poverty, and extreme poverty all around the world. But although the success of capitalism can be easily demonstrated, what many don't always grasp is the counterfactual scenario, where the adoption of a systematic collectivist model takes you, even within the lax rules of capitalism. As I've already said, the best example may well be the Argentine case. Our entire history is testimony to what can happen when you abandon the model of liberty and replace it with collectivist experiments. When Argentina adopted and began to enforce its first libertarian constitution back in 1860, it took us only 35 years to become a world power. From being a country of barbarians, we became the first one in history to end illiteracy, with total GDP higher than the aggregate of Brazil, Mexico, Paraguay, and Peru. We had more railway lines than the sum of all Latin American countries. We were compared to Germany, to the United States, and to the UK. And people from all over the world fled from nations that today we envy, and they crossed oceans to find an opportunity in our land. A foreman could aspire to the sun becoming a producer, a workman to the sun becoming a builder, an illiterate worker to their son undertaking studies and getting a skilled job. It was an explosion in trade, production, and human demographic and human development, with almost no other similar example in history. But at the peak of this process, based on the well-meaning idea of distributing among all the wealth created, Argentine leaders began to implement that misnomer that is the doctrine of social justice, which advocates that the state should cater to the endless needs of people. This is a theory that is at odds with reality, because whether we like it or not, demands are endless, but resources are finite. As a result of this view of the relationship between the state and the economy, public spending increased dramatically. In order to finance this rise in expenditure, they first asphyxiated the Argentine people with taxes. When the taxes were no longer enough, they started to burn up the stock of foreign currency reserves built up in our golden years. And when no one wanted to lend any more money to us because we had become the greatest serial defaulter in history, they started to print money unlimitedly. So as to give you a sense of what we are talking about, since 1949, the monetary base in the US multiplied by 16, whereas in Argentina, it did so by an astronomical 25,000 trillion times. No, the figure is not wrong. It is a real, actual figure. I'm not making it up. Again, the monetary base expanded by 25,000 trillion times. That is the extent of havoc that politicians can wreak if they're allowed to deviate from the basic principles of a market economy. And this cycle we have witnessed not just once, but about a dozen times. Again and again, all basic rules of the economy were broken in order to sustain the drive of politicians to spend beyond our means. And as the natural result of these measures, we saw how our citizens started to become systematically impoverished until we dropped to number 140 in the world per capita GDP ranking, with the result being a tenfold multiplication in poverty in the last 50 years. For 100 years, we repeated this toxic pattern with one collectivist experiment after another. And last year, we hit one of the lowest points in this cycle when we took office, and we found a situation so critical that if it had all carried on as it was, the economy would have been heading for a hyperinflation of at least 15,000%. So as an economist, as an Argentine as well, I know firsthand how playing with fire can divert a country from the path of progress and steal 100 years of its history from it. Therefore, a few months ago in Davos, I asked myself, how can it be that academia, international organization, politics, and economic theory demonize an economic system that has rescued from extreme poverty over 90% of the global population? Why does the West want to forego of its own accord the principles and beliefs that made it come such a long way? And why does it insist on experiments for which there are historical examples of failure, such as is the case with Argentina? Of course, when we talk about Davos, we are not talking about just any forum. It may well be the global institution with the greatest influence in charting the political and economic course for both nations, corporations, societies, and NGOs for the past 40 years. But leaders in the West have forgotten about an elementary truth, and it is the moral responsibility of those of us who still remember it to defend it and declaim it. That inescapable truth is that economic liberty in the pursuit of individual interest creates collective benefits, and that therefore business people who risk capital with a view of profit are social benefactors. Because in a system that guarantees the classic institutions of libertarianism, private property, free markets free from government intervention and free competition, meaning that you can go in and out, the division of labor and social cooperation, well, the only way to succeed is by supplying others with goods or services of a better quality or at a better price. However, those in charge of the leading nations and organizations in the West don't rely on this idea and view the economy through a theoretical framework, believing that the market is imperfect, that it leads to failures, and that it requires state intervention to be perfected. The trouble with this perspective is that it justifies interventions that bring more problems than benefits and undermine economic growth. Not only don't they resolve the problem they intended to resolve, but they obstruct what Hayek called the process of discovery. The market, presupposing free competition and a system of free prices with clear signals, is a mechanism of extraction and transmission of information in which the greater the freedom, the better the functioning. So a free market is a discovery process in which a capitalist finds on the go the right path in a constant quest for the benefits inherent in offering better quality goods and services at a better price. Those who favor interventionism don't just prevent the virtuous functioning of the market, but on top of it, they are self-congratulating and they exchange medals of social responsibility at pompous ceremonies, while at the same time they push an agenda of values that gradually opens the doors to socialism and therefore to misery. This view of markets is also what underlies a phenomenon that is no longer just a fad and has become a mandate in Western culture. And I would like to take a moment to comment on this. I mean a self-repressive and self-flagellating culture that has spread across the corporate world, the world of journalism, the world of education, and the world of entertainment. It's a culture where, due to different forms of coercion, either directly or indirectly fostered by the state, individuals are persecuted in order for them to submit to supposed morality mandates on issues such as gender, racial issues, or environmental matters, all of which eventually undermines the ability of business to generate wealth. These are notions that lead to the absurdity of punishing merit in order to reward diversity, the absurdity of regulating the free circulation of ideas in order not to offend a few sensitive souls. They demonize technological optimism out of a fear of climate change. These are ideas and approaches that punish ambition and reward mediocrity, that punish risk and reward conservatism. Basically, they're ideas that fuel sad passions and encourage us to become ever smaller versions of ourselves, when it's precisely innovation, ambition, and even greed in human activity that have driven the development of humankind. In other words, as a civilization, having seen what we are capable of, we are choosing to distrust our own ability, deny our own virtue, our own identity, and commit what is clearly collective suicide. Today, it's already too late in some places, and we are horrified to see the fruits that these ideas are bearing. For example, this week in the States, with tens of thousands of young people across university campuses justifying Islamic terrorism and promoting anti-Semitism. In other words, literally, the future elite of the West is estranged from its own culture. Marx used to say, in that detestable pamphlet he wrote with Engels, that capitalism carried in itself the germ of its own destruction. Let us hope that, like with the rest of the things he wrote about, he was wrong. Now, do not be mistaken. I do believe that the private sector has a very clear social responsibility mandate, but it doesn't have to do with over-moralizing or guilt trips. The true social responsibility of business people is a natural effect of the free functioning of their own economic activity, the mandate to produce goods and services of a better quality or at a better price. The social responsibility of business people is about making money, and that they can only do by serving others with goods of a better quality at a better price. So business people are social benefactors, regardless of the criticism leveled by squandering politicians. And that mandate translates into the creation of more competitive markets with societies that are more satisfied, and at the end of the day, it will not just satisfy demands, but also broaden the horizons of what humans want to do and can do through technological innovation. In other words, this mandate ultimately trends towards human excellence and to the enhancement of humankind. It's not a mandate stemming from superficial moralin carried out by regulating the free market. It's a mandate of glory, which is met by unfettering the potential. On the other hand, when the drive of some to regulate blocks the human pulsion to create, it binds us hand and foot, and we face a problem, because building a promising future for our species is impossible if there are good ideas that are still considered heretical to be explored, because building a promising future for humankind is impossible if we sacrifice merit, competition, and results on the altar of diversity, as it was precisely the free circulation of ideas and a system of incentives promoting effort and merit that built the pillars on which the West was built. So today, I would like to reassert the value of the great ambitions of our species and civilization. For as long as there have been free markets, we have pushed back boundaries further and further. In 250 years, we have rescued a lot of people from poverty. We have put men on the moon and are now aiming for Mars. And this we have done thanks to the ambition, creativity, and optimism of people like you, who partnered with one another in a quest quest for their own happiness. We don't have to lose faith in that primal ambition that we humans have as a guide. We're a species of explorers, of creators, of inventors, not one of bureaucrats. And it's adventurous entrepreneurs, not desktop bureaucrats, that currently embody this timeless quality of the human spirit. Therefore, I cannot but celebrate the endeavor of my friend Elon Musk to set foot on Mars, because we think that space exploration is part of our destiny as an explorer species, too big to be confined to this planet. We have the moral obligation to protect the pillars that made this whole edifice of ambitions, achievements, and dreams possible, the pillars on which the history of human progress was built are the defense of life, liberty, and property. If we forget about that or take it for granted, we run the risk of losing it all. I look at Argentina with all of the changes we're undertaking, and I see that we're against the global trend, because while in the rest of the world the ideas of liberty are under attack, in Argentina a renewed faith in them is growing. While the West is turning towards control and imposition, Argentina is turning towards trusting our citizens to exercise their freedom. While the West turns towards deficit, bureaucracy, and meddlesome government, Argentina is turning towards austerity, savings, and makes the state withdraw from economic activity. While the West turns towards economic shamanism and unsustainably heterodox formats that endanger the future of all, Argentina is returning to the path of reason and the ideas of common sense. And it is doing so with broad support across all segments of society. Because after decades of recession in Argentina, the pro-capitalist consensus permeates all of society. So we are managing to make the fastest and largest state adjustments in the history of humanity without losing support along the way. This is because society has understood it's worth making the effort required by a change of course. The big government model is a prison, and the people of Argentina have understood this. This is why they support the bill we are pushing through in Congress, which is the largest government tax, financial and regulatory reform project in the last 150 years. How come that the political group with the smallest parliamentary minority in a context of dire economic hardship can still spearhead the most ambitious reform in memory and do so with popular support? This is because Argentine society demands a major and urgent change of course in order to again espouse the ideas of liberty. When we took the helm of government and of the economy in Argentina in December, we announced from day one that with us, deficit would end and therefore money printing and inflation. The establishment would not believe us, and a lot of things were said. It was said that making an adjustment of over 1 GDP point was impossible, that having zero deficit within the first year would be impossible, that a low rate policy would be no good to reduce inflation. But we have defied these forecasts and are reaching our objectives. In just 5 months, we have achieved the first quarter with fiscal and financial surplus in the federal public sector for the first time in 20 years, having inherited from the previous administration consolidated deficit of over 15 GDP points, including the Treasury and central bank deficits, which, this is no exaggeration, is a feat of historic proportions worldwide, not just in Argentina. We have drastically cut public spending by reducing by 76% discretionary transfers to our provincial states, by adjusting also 87% of public works projects. We did away with 50% of political appointments, closed down unnecessary government agencies, and, above all things, eliminated government advertising. This is why you will hear a bunch of journalists speaking evil of our government, because we have touched the most sensitive organ, their pockets. We slammed on the brakes on Treasury financing through money issuance, and as a result of the fiscal and monetary anchor, inflation has started to go down and has been consistently lower week after week for the past 4 months. At the same time, we have implemented a systematic rate reduction policy without the exchange rate or inflation shooting up. The establishment argued that this was impossible, and we have done all of this with all of politics, most of the journalists, and most crony capitalists against us. And without the legal instruments we were seeking in Congress, and which all other presidents in recent years have had, which was partly to be expected, because for every budget line item we are cutting back on, there's some privilege or business we are taking away from some politician or crony. But even in the face of such adversity, we are delivering, and we are backed by results. There's still a lot of work ahead, but we have set a course that most Argentines believe in, and a plan to get there. We intend to shrink government, to expand society, aiming at consolidated public spending of 25% of GDP, 10 GDP points less than in the States and half the level of France, to have some comparisons. Our guiding star is to give back to Argentines every peso we save, first by eliminating or ending inflation, and then when the time comes, by reducing taxes. And it is also our goal to undo the mesh of regulations that Argentina has become, to free up economic activity and unlock the productive forces. We have therefore issued an executive order repealing over 350 laws, and we are proposing a bill containing reforms in the fiscal, labor, pensions and tax fields, including an unprecedented promotion regime for large investments. With all of these legal instruments, we will have introduced about 700 structural reforms in the first 5 months in office, a reform program 7 times larger than the state reform introduced by former President Carlos Menem in the early 90s. That was the last major libertarian project in Argentina. In other words, we are concretizing the most ambitious reform program in the past 150 years, because the only way to get 60% of Argentines out of poverty is through economic growth, and there can only be economic growth with freedom. There's no other way. The way we see it, the only task for the state is to protect life, the freedom and property of Argentines, so that each one can be the architect of their own destiny. This is our vision, similar to the one all prosperous countries in the West pursued at the greatest times in their history. The job of the state, of government, is not to put imaginary money into people's pockets, but rather to guarantee the necessary macroeconomic and legal conditions for the private sector to be able to develop on its own. There should be a state that protects the life, liberty and property of individuals, and a thriving private sector that takes risks, bets on the country and creates wealth. We lay the foundations. The private sector takes care of the rest. This is why, after sharing with you today who we are and what we want for our country, I also wish to extend an invitation to you and your counterparts around the world and from Argentina. After decades of stagnation, Argentina has all that it takes to embark on an economic convergence process that will put us or place us alongside the great powers of the world. Economic convergence takes place when the countries with lower per capita income grow more than the more developed countries, and eventually catch up with them. Why? Because for decades we have been a pressure cooker boiling with the lid on. All you need to do is take the lid off and go back to what Hayek called the function of the market as a discovery process. Our view is that resuming this discovery process will lead to a dramatic leap forward in growth, as growth opportunities tend to be greater the more underused capacity there is in a country. And from this perspective, if a country has seen the effective use of its resources impeded for decades, and then from one day to the next the country normalizes, it's only natural to expect huge growth rates commensurate with all the potential there is to exploit. So the low capitalization of the economy as a result of 20 years of populism determined to destroy capital will create tremendous investment opportunities for those who bank on the country. So Argentina could not only exhibit high growth rates due to the opportunities to be unlocked due to its low development level, world, but also, given the brutal destruction of capital that took place in the past, this would yield enormous returns merely by activating ideas and projects that have already been discovered, but have been hindered by heaps of unnecessary regulations. So by rebuilding tax savings with a massive reduction in the tax burden and by reinforcing respect for property rights, we'll make sure that achieving development is no longer just a dream and that it again becomes a reality. Today I'm here to tell you that Argentina is ready to take up that enormous challenge. I'm convinced without a shadow of doubt that Argentina has all necessary conditions to be the new Mecca of the West. It's a safe country, away from any conflictual border situation in a world that moves further and further away from peace. It's a country open to engage in trade relations with the whole world, that also being the best possible reassurance to ensure continuing cooperation and to avoid war. We have comparative advantages wherever we look. We have the world's most fertile land. We ushered in the revolution of no-till harvesting and have one of the most highly developed agribusiness sectors in the world. We have mountains rich in lithium, silver, gold and copper, which are minerals that the global economy needs and that due to negligence, lack of investment and lack of ambition, we have refrained from exploiting. We have a sea teeming with fishery resources. We have a direct link to the next human frontier, which is Antarctica. And we have a concentration of geographic and ecological diversity that only 2 or 3 countries can boast around the world. Mountains, deserts, glaciers, forests, rainforests, beaches, altiplano, lakes, wetlands, steppes, and vast fields and plains as far as the eye can reach. And we also have the key comparative advantage, top-notch human capital, resources trained at local universities that are leaders in the region, the country with the highest number of Nobel Prize winners in Latin America, and also the country with the largest per capita number of unicorns in the region. And this is no small feat, since our citizens were trained against the bumpy backdrop of economic volatility. Who could be better trained than the people of Argentina, who've always had no alternative but to live escaping the harassment of the state, to live with peace of mind. And today, for the first time in 150 years, against the tide of a world that is less and less free, Argentina becomes more and more a country with more and more freedom each day. For the first time in 150 years, we are creating the conditions to turn all of the gifts bestowed upon us by God into a promise of prosperity. The work of a capitalist is about discovery, and the task of humanity itself is about discovery. And nations like ours, born out of that spirit of discovery, are the best embodiment of that. It is no coincidence that the most dynamic economists of the Western world in the last 100 years have been the ones in the Americas, with the US leading. It's no coincidence that the Forum of Bureaucrats should be held in Europe and the Forum of Discoverers should be held in America. We have different spirits. Argentina today continues to be a country, a nation, and a people eager to discover and to be discovered, as we were in the late 19th century. And we are ready. We have already embarked on the race to take a quantum leap in production and development. The window of opportunity for this new gold rush will not last forever. It's today, it is now. This is why I also tell business people in Argentina, do not rest on your laurels, because you'll find that there are players out there with more capital and a greater capacity for risk-taking, willing to make the investments which the country needs. Finally, I wish to conclude my remarks by inviting all of you here, who are the heroes of the history of the progress of humankind, so that if, like me, you believe in the superiority of a free enterprise capitalism, if you believe, like me, that the West is slowly but surely heading in the direction of regression, if you believe, like me, that merit, ambition, liberty, innovation, and optimism are essential values of humankind that should be rewarded, I wish to invite you to bet on Argentina. You, as the embodiment of human progress, can help me make Argentina the new Rome of the 21st century, to make Argentina a land of opportunity for all those who are willing to inhabit our land. You are the ones that can demonstrate to the world's bureaucrats that they're destroying the West, that the ideas of liberty are the only way to achieve prosperity. So, along these lines, I would also like to share something that I think is very significant. This is something that Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI, said. He said, "There is a self-hatred of the West, which is strange and which can only be regarded as something pathological. Of its history, it now sees only what is deplorable and destructive, while it is no longer able to perceive what is great and pure. Therefore, I ask for us to once again embrace the ideas of liberty with pride. Let us be proud of being entrepreneurs. Let us be proud of being business people, because entrepreneurs and business people are the true social benefactors, the ones that create wealth and have lifted the world out of poverty." So I ask you to join us Argentines in this rebirth of the West. And finally, I would like to thank you all. May God bless the Argentines. May the forces of heaven be with us. And I had to say this: long live freedom, damn it!
Shalom.